Welcome to another episode of Retrospective Gaming. In this episode, I am reviewing Risen. The next two reviews will be Aeon of Sands and ELEX. I don't like telling you what my next reviews are going to be, but in this case, since it's been a while, you deserve to know, and I promise the next reviews won't take nearly as long as this one took. I finally got my personal problems fixed. Well, at least enough to start focusing on this hobby again. There are spoilers in this review. I wouldn't say it's anything major, but still, there are spoilers. You have been warned. Let's get this review started. The story starts off with you, an unknown nobody, and Sarah on board a ship. Now, as the title suggests, something has risen in the world, and you are introduced to a small view, a little taste of what that exactly is. The Inquisitor, the man with an eye optical, you see him trying to fight one of these titans on a boat. Things go horribly wrong and he decides to abandon ship, leaving everyone on the ship to die. Luckily, the unnamed main character and Sarah survive, only to end up stranded on this mysterious island. You two are the only survivors left, leaving you to figure out the mystery behind the Inquisitor, the Titans, the island, and all these temples, these objects, these areas that just start popping up out of nowhere on this weird island that's away from the rest of the world. What is this place? You're stranded on this island and that's how Risen starts. If you're familiar with other Piranha Bytes games like ELEX or especially Gothic, then you should know the basic outline, the basic formula, and this doesn't stray from it at all. The basic formula is you're on this area that you know nothing about. You have a little intro to show what's going on, but other than that, you just have to explore everything and figure it out. But there are camps, there's different factions on the island. And the main factions on this island are the Don's camp, led by Don Esteban, the Inquisition, and the Order of the Holy Flame. Don Esteban and his people used to rule the island. They're bandits, rebels, but once the Inquisition came in, they lost their power and they retreated to a small part of the island next to a temple. The Inquisition is led by the guy with the cool headpiece you see in the beginning, the Inquisitor. He now controls the monastery and harbor town. He also took control of the Order of the Holy Flame, another important faction. The main story revolves around the mystery of what keeps this island going, what keeps it safe. Why did these ruins start popping up out of nowhere and what controls it? Why are the Titans rising and what are the secrets behind them? The power struggle and the politics between the different factions. And guess who has to discover this? Of course, you. Risen is a game with an interesting premise, and the beginning builds that up pretty well. It's a nice start. You're making your way through this dense island filled with all types of wildlife chasing you, and they are ruthless. This is a Piranha Bytes game, so you don't slowly work your way. No, as soon as you start running through this island, right in the beginning, first 5 minutes, you have like 10 fucking things chasing you. And that's what you have to deal with. You have no understanding of the Titans. All you've seen was this motherfucker jump out the ocean. A small intro. That's your only understanding of the Titans in the beginning. You're just a regular dude trying to survive. The first signs of human life you see are people telling you about the Don's camp, which is not that far away, and the Inquisition. There's a nice part in the game that's not that long and it's right in the beginning, but it's memorable for one reason. Right in the beginning, you find this farm, and you talk to the people working there, and they tell you horrifying, terrifying stories about the Inquisition, like their cult. They tell you these stories about people being brainwashed, and if an Inquisition member catches you, you will be kidnapped, you will be mentally tortured, because that's what brainwashing is, and forced to be a recruit on their faction to do their bidding. And there's a part where you actually have to hide from them on the farm. This sets up the game pretty well. The fear, the isolation, and just confirmation that you are an ant in the lion's den trying to survive. I like that. I like the mystery. I like the fact that you barely know what the hell is going on, even though you see a Titan in the beginning cutscene. And going through the main story, I went through some areas, temples, hidden caves that were really clever with the puzzles and how you can get trapped inside and die easily, and different things you can do to avoid these death traps. So there were some really clever areas in this game for sure. The puzzles that I had to do in a certain area underneath the monastery just in order to find one of the teachers, and how it makes you utilize magic in that area beneath the monastery, that sectioned off place that kind of felt like its own world. I really love that area. There are 4 chapters in the game, but by the middle of chapter 3, I just felt that it didn't keep its momentum going at all. Keeping a player invested in the story to a satisfying conclusion is the main thing a story has to do, even if every part isn't perfect. There can be road bumps, there can be slowdowns, but for the most part, it has to keep the momentum going. Unfortunately, Risen, unlike Gothic and Gothic 2, doesn't do that. You have 3 main factions: the Inquisition, the Don's Camp, and the Order of the Flame. And the Don's Camp is fucking boring and stale. Their leader, Don Esteban, is so fucking flat, and honestly, his wife is more interesting than him and makes a better presence. My issue with the Don's Camp is that they are a major faction. They used to control the island, but they got pushed back by the Inquisition, and now they're forced to be in some shitty swamp next to a temple, hoping that the riches in that temple bring them back to their former glory. And this leads to my favorite area early on, Harbor Town. The Inquisition took it over from the Don and his crew. These are minor spoilers at best because this is something you learn very early on. Harbor Town is my favorite area because of the conflicts and the quests in this little area, and how certain people are relevant and interwoven into the main story, right until the end. How some pirates and their history interfere in some side and main quests, and how they're relevant to this town. And the Don's men are still around in this area, figuring out ways to take back power, and this is where you come in. The Inquisition and the Don and his men, they don't like each other, obviously. They are enemies, and you have the option whether to help the Don or the Inquisition. Obviously, everything leads back to the Inquisitor. It's not a secret. His face is on the title screen, and you see him as soon as you start the intro, so the path is not very open-ended, and it doesn't have to be. That's not my main issue. A story can still be very satisfying, as, for example, let's say it's an action RPG, but it's not the most open. It can work. But my issue is how dull the Don and his crew are, and how I think their story makes no fucking sense. The conflict between the Don and the Inquisition is most prominent in Harbor Town. I constantly fucked over the Don, and what comes out of this? Barely anything. I mean, what the fuck? No small-scale faction war, no constant rebellion. The members make little threats and leave. And if they were some little insignificant faction, I could understand that, but they play a major part in the story. And that's a problem, whether it was due to laziness or rushing the game, incompetence, a mixture of all of them, whatever. And an argument can be made before I went to the Inquisition or Harbor Town or any of that. I did some of the Don's Camp, well, I did most of the quests for the Don's Camp, and I gained favor with them. So why would they attack you? But let's get one thing straight. The favors that you can do for them and the quests that you do for them is nothing, and a lot of them aren't even interesting. The wife is the most interesting character in my opinion, but that's nothing compared to fucking them over and giving the Inquisition more power. They have no response to that, or barely any response. I can't even remember. I don't think there was any. They don't do anything. That's the problem. They're just there. They're a gnat. And they have a significant part in the story because of the temple they reside in and the Don. They play such an important part, but they're just there. They exist. And just to clarify, it's not all bad. I don't have a problem with how the Don and his men are portrayed in the first chapter and a half, the beginning. When you side with them, they open up more, obviously. You get more quests, and there's a nice one that involves a raid. It's not fantastic, but it's not terrible. I didn't have a problem with that. It's how they are maintained throughout the story. That's my problem. And it goes back to what I was talking about before, momentum. The Don and his men, they gangsters. They thugs. It's like Bloods and Crips between them with the Inquisition. It's a gang war, or whatever the fuck you would call a gang war in that world. There are opportunities to try and get power back, especially in one instance where a major area is under grave threat. This was the perfect chance for them to try to get power back. There's so many things that they could have done, or just do to you instead of anyone else, because you fucked them over. Whether you get captured or you volunteer, all roads lead to the monastery. It's not that open-ended, and that's not the problem I have. And you have to help the Inquisition out in some way, that's a given. But they just treat you like you're there, like you never did anything to them. So that's my problem with them. They could have been fleshed out and handled better. To be fair, the Don is not completely useless. He does show his fangs at some point, if you side with him in the beginning, but still, I think it was a cheap cop-out. I still think they should have been more aggressive, and even with that, even when I went back and played that little storyline to try to see if there's anything different, I didn't like it. Just my opinion. Now, the monastery and Harbor Town are my favorite areas in the game. The monastery, this is an important part in the game, and it's an important part to how your characters develop and the type of playstyle that he will have. Love that area, and I love how it's supposed to be like a very secluded, peaceful place where people go to train, but once you figure out their inner politics and their little cliques, it's just like any other place. It's just like human nature. Those two are my favorite areas. Now let's get back to momentum. After the middle of the third chapter, I just started losing interest, and that's not to say the third and fourth chapter are terrible. There are some things I like. I do like the areas that you go to in chapter 4 in order to get the stuff needed in order to progress the story. I did like that. But the main problem is momentum. Because I'm just going to say this as bluntly as possible, and I'm a blunt person, but I don't have to say a lot of words this time. The ending sucks. It's fucking terrible. The main obstacle that you have to defeat in order to get the ending is child's play. It's like kindergarten. I understand every enemy in every game, they have patterns. They have things that you have to get over. You can learn the enemy and blah blah blah, figure out its weaknesses and its pros. This has nothing to do with that. It's like playing Simon Says for 10 seconds. Just hit the blue and red button and you're done. That's how easy it is. It's like a checklist. I wouldn't even call it a fight. It's like a fucking roller coaster ride. Just go on it, go through it, make sure you don't hit your fucking head on the beams and chop your head off and you're done. It's that easy, and it was fucking awful. And I don't want to hear the excuse that, oh, there's a second Risen game, so that's why the ending wasn't spectacular. There's no reason for that. It was fucking awful. The build up, what you hear about, and just to get to this fucking ending, terrible. Now overall, I did enjoy the story of the game. Even the stuff that I said, I enjoyed it. I liked it. But that ending was fucking awful. And just so no one gets confused about what I'm saying, the end fight has nothing to do with my character, because yes, I like to do as much stuff as I can in a game, so it had nothing to do with my character being OP, because your character level and what you do frankly doesn't matter at the end, and I'm not going to explain why. So just to clarify, that has nothing to do with that. The ending boss is just awful, and the ending, ugh, that's all I have to say about that. But overall, I enjoyed the story, but just a bit of caution, the ending does fucking suck. Risen, just like Gothic, uses a Piranha Bytes formula. It's about power and numbers, especially in the beginning. You will be overwhelmed, and it's not because the AI is so fantastic. In fact, it's average and sometimes terrible. It's about numbers. Running through these wooded areas, it's not uncommon to get mobbed by 5, 6, or even more creatures at once. A sea vulture, stingray, or black wolf may not be deadly on its own, but they run in packs. You might run into a camp of 10 gnomes in one small area, and when you enter their field of view, be prepared. Some of them throw shit to knock you off guard. You'll run into a hideout with a dozen skeletons lying around protecting their lord. And like Gothic, it does not sugarcoat this approach. It throws it in your face. And this is how I think CRPGs should be. Not start off easier and get progressively harder, but start off hard, almost overwhelming, and get slowly easier as you learn the mechanics. Timing is an important thing. You just can't swing your melee weapon like a meth head hoping to hit something. While the AI isn't amazing at all, they know how to block and counter, and when you're dealing with swarms of enemies that can hit you from any angle, you have to learn. And just like in Gothic, you have to be patient. This isn't the first Gothic game, so you don't have to press space up to attack. All you have to do is click. I believe it was space up in the first Gothic, but I could be wrong. But no matter what, the same principles apply. Patience. Just like many other RPGs, you have the options of melee, ranged, and magic, with a little hint of survival. You can use animal meat to cook meals and learn recipes, just a small hint. You are trapped on an island after all. Once you level up, you have skill points that you can use to go to trainers to learn different skills, and I chose to be a pure mage, or as close to one as I possibly could. And my first issue with the gameplay is that the game gets pretty easy once Act 3 hits. In the middle of Act 3, I maxed out Fireball and was easily just crushing most mobs of enemies. All I had to do was spam Fireball, run back a little bit, and spam Fireball again, and I would win a lot of fights that way. There are a lot of spells you can get ingredients for to learn and use, but I never needed most of them. Obviously, I needed levitation, transformation, and telepathy. As I said before, Risen has a good start. It builds up pretty well, but the last chapter and a half, it plummets, and that's no different with difficulty. Now, when I talk about difficulty, it's hard because I'm a person that does everything I can. I want to see and do as much as possible. So yeah, maybe my character was overpowered, but I still found a challenge falling off. And even though I said I like when the CRPG starts off overwhelming and gets a little bit easier, it shouldn't get this easy. There should have been a bigger challenge. I mean, once you max out Fireball, you can easily handle ogres, hordes of gnomes, ashbeat, saurians, and more pretty easily. The only thing holding you back is how slow your character is, and I didn't have the best gear I could get too. Sometimes I forgot to get a better shield and get better robes, and I still found it extremely easy once Act 3 hit. The same thing applies to currency. I had more than I needed. My wisdom wasn't high enough to get the last circle of magic, which I will give credit. You have to explore a lot to get the final circle. Increasing your wisdom to that level isn't easy, but I didn't need to use those spells, so it was just a waste of time. Now the AI is mediocre, and it had some hilarious moments where creatures would be skitzing around and get stuck in walls, things like that. Now, that's not to say I didn't enjoy the game. Even with its problems, I don't regret playing it. There are some very clever areas and characters, how certain people in Harbor Town connect to the main story, and other things like that. And some of the temples late game frustrated the fuck out of me, but that's because I just don't pay attention sometimes. I like that it was more than just a simple fetch quest though. It had some good puzzles and layouts, and I do believe some areas should have had more time put into it, especially the Don's camp. I do appreciate the atmosphere. One of the things Risen gets right is the fact that civilization is there, but it's scattered, and when you roam around, like Gothic, you feel like yourself and other humans are at a disadvantage trying to survive. Just trying to follow a path to Harbor Town, you'll run into dozens of rabid animals trying to tear you apart. It's all about how much you can handle. Lure one creature out and slowly reduce the threat of the pack until they are gone. Risen does a good job of maintaining that stranded on a mysterious island, humans ain't the dominant ones here. Good luck, human. Feel. The placement of enemies, it's not bad. There were certain moments where I felt cocky. I escaped the cave unharmed, only to run up a path and run into 4 ogres. Or run away from a pack of animals, just head straight into a skeleton camp where I had 10 skeletons that fucking jumped me. No mercy. They fucked me over and fucked me up bad. You definitely have a lot of moments where you think you're safe one moment, but as soon as you turn a corner, you're mobbed. It's about power and numbers, not strong AI. Relying on multiple dumb enemies to be a threat, rather than an intelligent AI that reacts to your actions and plans around it. It's a shame. The AI could have been better, and the challenge is there. And the enemy placement is pretty good. You can roam this island as you please, knowing that certain parts you go to, you're going to get fucked up because you're not strong enough yet. But the satisfaction that when you are strong enough, you can go there and just destroy them, that's great. But the problem is the challenge didn't last. As I said before, until Act 3, there was challenge. After that, it got pretty easy, and the AI is weird. It goes all over the place. There were some NPCs that put up a really good fight. These were NPCs that I fought early on, and they gave me a better challenge than some endgame NPCs, especially the last boss. I mean, some of these people are supposed to be very powerful, but their AI was trash compared to some scrubs with a basic sword I fought early on. And it's not because of me knowing the game better. I mean, how they react and their movements, although you can take advantage of most of the enemies by pushing them into the corner and swinging over and over again, it will stun them and you can get some good cheap chops from it. Even though with all that being said, the AI should have been better. It's not incredibly awful, but it's just mediocre. It's about power and numbers. But I will say this, as I said before, enemy placement, I liked it. I liked how you can roam the world as you please, knowing that you're probably going to get fucked over in some areas. And I like the secrets on the island that you could explore. This is an island that's worth exploring. It was interesting enough that I wanted to figure out as much as I can. Main and side quests, and to figure out the secrets of the island, what's going on, what species have been there for a while, etc. Things like that. It was interesting to me. Now, I do wish some areas were more fleshed out. For example, the Don's camp. I don't think the whole area is bad. There is a nice background when you first get there, and this is right in the beginning, about a power struggle since the Don is hidden away in the temple. People are trying to take over. I do like that, and that was pretty cool. But other than that, the whole place was kind of a bore to me. That's just my personal opinion. And there were more filler quests overall than I would have liked. Quests like kill X amount of creatures, grab this. There were more than that than I would have wanted. And even though this is an action RPG and I don't expect the most open-ended gameplay, 16 different choices, things like that, I'm not expecting freedom like Arcanum from a Piranha Bytes game. I understand that. I do wish there were a bit more open-ended choices with some of the quests and how you develop into the story. It's all mainly all paths lead to the monastery, stuff like that. Even though it's not a big problem to me and I kind of expect it from a Piranha Bytes game, I do wish there was a bit more freedom. Now, one of the things I really like about this game is how you deal with fast travel. You can run, and there is a spell where you can run faster if that's how you want to explore the island, but that's not the only way. Once you progress a certain amount, you can get these objects that allow you to travel to specific areas. You can't go anywhere you want. You can't just click on a city or a camp and just go there. You have to follow wherever these runes travel to, and there are more of them than I would have liked. I would have removed about 4 of them. I just don't like having too many options for fast travel. I'm crazy. I just like exploring everything on foot, but the option is there to fast travel with these runes, and I like how they deal with it. It's a perfect compromise. You don't have to run everywhere, but you also don't have to fast travel and have an easy way to just go wherever you want and you miss out on the scenery, stuff like that. So I like that. Now, as far as voice acting and music, I had no problems with the music. You'll hear some of my favorite tracks in the background. And voice acting, it's a Piranha Bytes game. It's mediocre. The English voice acting, it ranges from some of it being bad to some of it being okay. It never bothered me. Is Risen stable? In terms of bugs, the biggest problem I had was enemies getting caught into walls. Sometimes it was funny and other times it was annoying. That problem is there, and the game crashed a bit too much for my liking. I could deal with 1 or 2 maybe, but it crashed more than that. Overall, this is a Piranha Bytes game, so in terms of stability, it's not the most stable game. That's expected with Piranha Bytes games, but it's not an excuse. And the bugs are still there, but it was stable enough for me to finish. So, is Risen worth playing? Yes. If you're a fan of Piranha Bytes games and you haven't tried this out yet, you should definitely play it. Is this game Gothic or Gothic 2? Fuck no. Don't know anything about Gothic 3 because I didn't play it yet, but I think the problem is that Gothic came out before Risen, and Gothic 1 and especially 2, amazing games, so you would expect Piranha Bytes to just refine this formula, make it better, and come out with a better game in Risen, but that's not what happened at all. Risen is not better than Gothic and Gothic 2. It's a worse game than those two. On its own, it's worth playing, and I think it's a good game, but the problem is that Piranha Bytes didn't make a better game even though they had that experience. They didn't make this formula better. It seems like they went back a bit. But besides all that, Risen's worth playing. Thank you for watching. If you want to, you can leave a comment. You know how to get into contact with me, and I promise the next reviews won't take nearly as long. Have a great day.